But first, the Albanese government is getting nervous about the possibility of a Trump win, which is looking more likely by the day. The race is tight, it could go either way, but Trump is inching ahead in the 7 swing states. Momentum is now in his favour, with Kamala Harris bizarrely taking a day off today, just 2 weeks out from the election.
Who the hell takes off? We have 14 days left. And she'll take a couple of more days off, too. You know why? She's lazy as hell, and she's got that reputation. She's a radical left lunatic. She's further left than Bernie Sanders or Pocahontas.
Labor is now panicking at the thought of a Donald Trump presidency. One Labor source told me today people were relieved that Biden left because they were worried that Trump was going to win. They were openly excited about Kamala Harris coming in, and now they're worried about Trump again. Another senior political figure put it more bluntly when he said, and I quote, "The Albanese government and DFAT were..." Well, you can read the rest of that sentence for yourselves. Albanese and Donald Trump couldn't be more different. Their views on fundamental policy areas just worlds apart. This is the case for everything from climate change to Israel to immigration, to China, to energy. Climate change is one of Albanese's top concerns, but Trump has previously described climate science as a hoax.
Taking advantage of the global transition to net zero that is so important. We have a 43% reduction target by 2030 that's legislated, and net zero by 2050 that's legislated.
I haven't heard, Mike, they don't ever talk about the environment anymore. You know why? Mike is saying, don't talk about it now. No, it's one of the great scams of all time. You know why they don't talk about it? Because people aren't buying it anymore.
Trump previously pulled out of the Paris Agreement, and he could again withdraw from international targets. He won't want climate to be a major feature of the Quad, as it has been with Joe Biden and Albanese. Their positions on Israel as well, this is Albanese and Trump's, couldn't be more different. Trump unequivocally supports Israel. He moved America's embassy to Jerusalem during his time in office. But Albanese has spent much of his parliamentary career as an anti-Israel campaigner, even yelling into a microphone at a pro-Palestinian rally.
We encourage all parties to engage constructively to de-escalate the current tensions. International humanitarian law must be respected. We also reiterate our call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza.
When I'm back in the Oval Office, I will support Israel's right to win its war on terror. They have to have a right to win the war. Thank you. And I will give Israel the support that it needs to win, but I do want them to win fast.
Now, there's already a concerning gap between Albanese and Joe Biden when it comes to support for Israel. In one glaring example, the Biden administration was deeply disappointed that Penny Wong refused to vote against that pro-Hamas resolution that was put forward by the Palestinian leadership and the United Nations General Assembly recently. And Penny Wong, when she was over in the States, met with the Palestinian leadership, but she didn't even sit in Congress to listen to Netanyahu's speech. Under Trump, the differences will be even more stark. And then there's immigration. Trump signed an executive order banning people from 6 Muslim-majority countries from entering the US back in 2020. But meanwhile, Anthony Albanese issued nearly 3,000 visas to Gazans, despite serious concerns about security vetting in the Hamas-controlled territory.
A whole group of people who are suffering enormously, something that we see on our TV screens every night. We have, when it comes to security processes, we have faith in our intelligence agencies.
We do not need our once great cities to become hotbeds of terrorism. And on day one of the Trump presidency, I'm restoring the travel ban, suspending refugee admissions, and keeping terrorists the hell out of our country, like I had it before.
If Trump does become president in just under 2 weeks, there'll be deep disappointment in the senior ranks of the Albanese government. One figure familiar with the Trump camp told me today that Trump will be well briefed on how left-wing Albanese and Penny Wong have been. They said that Trump will have a cursory call with Albanese, but then he won't bother with him because he's got an election he'll think that he's probably going to lose, and everyone tells him Dutton is a good guy. In fact, this source told me that Albanese has already made a mistake because he didn't phone Trump after the assassination attempt. Other world leaders like Keir Starmer did. In fact, the only Australian who's spoken to Trump personally in the last year, and maybe even more, is Scott Morrison. But it's also not a good starting point that Albanese appointed Kevin Rudd, as ambassador to the United States, despite the fact he described Trump in the past as nuts, a traitor to the West, and guilty of rancid treachery.
And Donald, as we know, is not a leading intellectual force.
Have you looked at a Trump rally and how many angry white men there are in those rallies?
Now, it has to be said that Rudd is now working overtime to forge connections in the Republican Party. I'm told he's making headway, sure. But what he said can't be unsaid, and that's why he wasn't a wise appointment. His past comments might be forgiven, they won't be forgotten, and this isn't going to help Australia's national interest. And Trump, for one, certainly hasn't forgotten them.
I don't know much about him. I heard he was a little bit nasty. I hear he's not the brightest bulb, but I don't know much about him. But if he's at all hostile, he will not be there long.
One senior figure said to me today that Kevin Rudd has put his head down and he's working hard to rebuild relationships, but they doubt he'll be invited around for margaritas at Mar-a-Lago. The confidence, meanwhile, in the Trump camp is growing 14 days out. Real Clear polling has Trump slightly ahead by 1.1% in the 7 battleground states that will decide the outcome of this election. And of course, that's Wisconsin, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Nevada. And nationally, according to Real Clear Politics, Kamala Harris does lead by 0.9%. But 4 years ago, Joe Biden was ahead at this point in the campaign by 7.9%. That's a major difference. Kamala Harris has enjoyed a honeymoon period for most of the campaign, and she initially surged ahead of Biden's position. But in recent weeks, there have been lingering questions over what she stands for, how she'd be different from the Biden administration, and there are concerns over her ability to deal with media scrutiny. Her performance, when under serious questioning from Brett Baier, was disastrous. That was pitiful for a presidential candidate. She's failed to explain whether she's changed her views from the radical positions she took in the past. And this has led to devastatingly effective adverts like this one.
Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners.
Surgery.
For prisoners.
For prisoners. Every transgender inmate in the prison system would have access.
The polls are close, and there'll be a sigh of relief from the Albanese government if there is a Harris presidency. But most informed commentators are at this point telling me they're expecting a narrow Trump victory.